Uh, Hello and welcome to today's webinar. Thank you all for joining us. Very glad to have you here, whether you're at the live session or you're watching back on demand. My name is James. I'm the content manager here at Lunio. I'll be hosting the conversation today and asking the questions and attempting to keep us on track for time. We're aiming for around 30 to 35 minutes today. I think we should be okay there. And there's a few other bits of housekeeping that I'll cover in just a moment. But today's webinar topic is something that's particularly relevant to most businesses at the moment. So how to convert wasted ad spend into revenue. Given the current economic climate we're in at the moment, at the beginning of 2023, I think pretty much every business out there is taking a closer look at their finances and spending to identify any areas where they can make cost savings or efficiency improvements. And of course, marketing departments are feeling the impact of that, essentially being asked to extract more revenue and overall business value from the same ad spend, or in some cases, having to adopt a more lean methodology due to a cutback in available budget. And obviously that comes with quite a few challenges. When you're trying to achieve more with less, you really do need to take a closer look at all your business as usual processes and try to spot those areas where inefficiencies may be creeping into your PPC strategy. So to help us guide us in the right direction, today we're speaking to Gareth Westhead, Head of Paid Media at the Manchester-based PPC agency Clicker. Gareth has been driving growth for B2B and B2C brands for more than 15 years, with a particular focus on using data to improve decision-making and drive better performance. How are you doing today, Gareth?
I'm doing good. Yeah, really good to be here. Thanks for inviting me along. Hopefully I can share some good insights and give listeners, give viewers some value that they can then use.
Yeah, looking forward to it. How have you found the first few weeks in January being back after the holiday break?
Generally positive. I think we've seen some mixed outlooks on 2023. I think there's a few things coming up this year that now they're within the same calendar year, people are really considering. It's going to become much more obvious to them that things are there. But yeah, generally positive.
Nice. And of course, we're also joined by Leo Pizarro, Head of Demand Generation at Lunio. How are things with you today, Leo?
Thanks for the intro, James. Yeah, pretty good. Love starting the year with some value sharing.
Yeah, 100%. So as I mentioned, just a few very quick bits of housekeeping before we get into it. We are recording this session and we will send it out by email afterwards to watch back on demand. We'll also be creating a written summary on the Lunio blog with key takeaways from the conversation today in a TLDR section. So be on the lookout for that later in the week when we've had a chance to write it up. If you have any questions, you can pop them in the chat and get the discussion going there. And we'll also be sending out a few polls during the live session to get audience feedback. So if you feel inclined, please do give us your responses to those. It's always interesting to see the different opinions and stances that we've got in the audience here today. Lastly, if you wait until the end of the webinar, we'll automatically redirect you to our free PPC resource hub, where you can access guides and tools to help boost your campaign performance and get Q1 off to a good start. So that's all the housekeeping out of the way. We've got 5 main points to cover on the agenda today. So firstly, we'll be exploring the possibilities of doing more with less when it comes to paid media, and how to weigh up the right balance between marketing efficiency versus marketing effectiveness. Next, we'll talk about some of the most common causes of wasted ad spend and what to do about them. Then we'll cover the downstream benefits of eliminating fake traffic and ad engagements. Then we'll discuss how to optimize exclusion targeting to increase your ROAS, before closing with a discussion on the paid media trends we expect to see in 2023, and no doubt we'll be touching on the recent popularity and marketing use cases for ChatGPT in that segment. So let's get into it and kick things off. So Gareth, what are your kind of top level thoughts on doing more with less in paid media? How achievable is that?
Yeah, it's a question that we get asked. We get asked a lot. I've been asked it a lot over my career. What could we do if we reduced spend by X amount? What could we do if we? I mean, at a real kind of the real cutting edge of things, and it's something we're hearing a lot at the moment. Is what could we do with less team members? So it's not just talking about less budget, but also less resource, and less availability. And it can often induce panic. It really can. But if we've got a good data set, if we've got good information available to us, we can look at things a lot more logically, a lot more practically, and at a top level. Certainly with technology that we've got available to us, I think to answer the question directly, we can do a lot more with the same or even less nowadays. I think it's important to maintain a view of the bigger picture. You can look at things certainly from my perspective at ClickU now. We're looking at things from a paid media perspective. We're getting lots of questions from clients as to what we can do going into this year. And for me the general point is to make use of technology to really enhance what your people can do, because the people are still the most important asset. But what can we do with the technology to allow us to expand our capabilities?
Nice. So let's say someone is in that position where they're working with a reduced budget or reduced headcount, and they're looking at these technologies and ways that they can improve efficiency. If someone is in that position of having less to work with, what are the kind of first steps that you would advise people to take? What are the key areas that they should be looking at, technology-wise?
Sure. So if we're talking about a reduced budget, it kind of implies that there's been a budget before. We've got something to work with. We've got some intelligence to work with, and the initial few steps for me start with understanding how we've performed up to now. Where's budget delivered the best performance? Where is it not delivered so well for us? And hopefully, if we're in this position where we're reducing budgets, we've got a level of insight into some metrics. And if not, that's where I would recommend starting, is to get that insight into how performance has been up to now. Otherwise, going forward, it's akin to swimming in the dark. Really, you don't really know where you are, where your budget's actually being spent, and where it's delivering. And kind of understanding some of those key metrics, such as, I mean, working backwards: profitability, revenue, average order value, cost per lead, cost per sale. There's lots of metrics that we can look at as to inform us how we've done. Moving then is understanding, look, what does marketing, what does PPC specifically need to deliver? Is that a specific number of customers? Is it a profit margin? Is it a revenue number? Is it a certain cost per sale, cost per lead target? And then using that data, we can then overlay really the new budget to give us a forecast. So if we understand things like cost per click, we understand click-through rates, we understand conversion rates, average order value, for example, we can start to really build up a funnel, picture of the funnel. So if we were to invest X amount into PPC, knowing the metrics that we've got, we could expect this to come out of the bottom. We can look at that at a high level, at an account level, but I would also recommend going a lot more granular into campaigns, into ad groups, and looking at where things are performing, where things could perform, because it's important to kind of keep an eye on where the growth areas are going to be. Because if we're taking two paid media channels, for example, chances are people are going to have been looking at Google ads for the last few years at least, if you've been doing that. But then you've got a new channel such as TikTok. If you're comparing them performance wise, then chances are TikTok isn't going to be anywhere near the volume, anywhere near the level of Google ads, but it could be a really good growth area. So it's important to look at that bigger picture. And it's also, I'm taking a step outside of paid media here. If we're looking at things like brand activity, SEO activity, it's important to keep a handle on those things, because if you were to stop investing in them now, it might be 3-6 months or even longer before you start to see the drops in performance from those. But the knock-on impact could be severe, and in certain circumstances I've seen it's been irreparable. So it's well worth just overlaying the budget that you now have with the information that you have, but also, yes, keeping a view of that bigger picture, which sometimes does sit outside PPC.
Yeah, so in terms of that bigger picture, I suppose it kind of comes down to marketing efficiency versus marketing effectiveness. And how do you know, or how can you feel confident that you've got a right kind of balance going between those two things?
So I really like the phrasing of that there. I think it's important to have a balance. We can't really have one without the other. They're so interdependent, and they should be discussed together. I think that said, balance in them is important because you can influence one over the other at certain times. But by measuring them, you can shift your attention between effectiveness and efficiency. I think if you're looking at effectiveness metrics, the key one is the key ones are sales growth, awareness, engagement. Some of the higher level measures of success. So how well is marketing doing? And if these are low, we can look at focusing on how we can improve the impact, how we can improve engagement through the content and the messaging that we're producing. But then on the flip side of that, if we're looking at efficiency, and these all feed into effectiveness overall, really, but we're looking at things like cost per sale, cost per lead, return on ad spend, and some of those real performance driven metrics. And if those are low, then we need to improve things like conversion rate. We need to improve AOV, or even if we're talking leads, reduce the time it takes for people to come to move through from being a lead to being an opportunity to being a closed deal. But as I mentioned previously, there it's the two are interdependent, and there is little merit in driving huge sales growth if it's not profitable, if it's not sustainable, because that's not necessarily good for the business, and vice versa. There's not much merit in driving up profitability if the number of sales are dropping, because then the actual bigger picture there for the business isn't necessarily good. You could be driving things you could be driving sales at 10, 11, 12, even more percentage of ROAS there. But if you're not getting the number of sales, then the business isn't going to actually be growing or going in the direction that it needs to. So that there does need to be that balance between the two.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense, especially that point about profitability. Leo, is there anything you'd want to expand on that in terms of the relationship between efficiency and profitability?
Yeah. So I would start by saying that there is a misconception that in order for you to be efficient, you need to reduce your marketing budget. And I would say that's, quite far from the truth. So yes, there's probably going to be less to spend this year across multiple businesses. So this is based on what we're hearing around spend being cut. But what efficiency really is ensuring that your marketing efforts are seeing higher profitability ratios. So one of the metrics that we're expecting marketers to be more focused on this year is the marketing efficiency ratio, so the MER. Essentially, you can really grow your marketing team if you're seeing a positive marketing efficiency ratio. So in other words, this is essentially a fancy term for ROAS. Now, just to touch on what Gareth mentioned, this isn't just measuring return on ad spend in the short term. This is also having that long-term vision. So it's not just understanding PPC channels in terms of, yes, we're seeing maybe a 4 or 5 to 1 contribution from paid, but how are other channels influencing your marketing mix? And I think what businesses will struggle to get to is, as they're making cuts to budgets, which is something that is already happening, this is going to affect other channels. So it's being wary of, yes, you might not be seeing a direct return from maybe social media, specifically organic social, but this is without a doubt influencing some of the purchasing decisions, some of that actually being attributed to paid.
Yeah, for sure. It can be very easy to lose sight of that. It can be very tempting to cut spend in areas that will come back to hurt you in the long run. So moving on, Gareth, in your experience, what are the common major causes of wasted ad spend that you've come across at Clickoo?
Sure. And I mean, wasted ad spend, yeah, it can happen kind of at a micro level, at a macro level, if things do get out of hand. But for me, there are kind of three main areas, and what one of them, I suppose, is more entered consciousness more recently, but those three main areas for me are a lack of tracking or a lack of insight into the performance. Then we've got Performance Max and kind of automated campaigns which have started to come over the last couple of years, but certainly with Performance Max in the last kind of 12 months or so has really shaken things up. But then another one, and it may be maybe not something that does necessarily enter people's minds is invalid traffic, fake traffic. So I mean, if we take those points in turn there with the lack of traffic, the lack of tracking, sorry, as the ad platforms have developed, they've become much more automated. We're relying much more on the data that we're feeding them rather than the actual human intervention. And for PPC, one of the key outcomes that we want to be driving is conversions. So if we're wanting to optimize for conversions, having tracking in place to understand what's converting and what's not is pretty crucial. Otherwise, there's nothing really for the machine learning to optimize to. It can't operate properly, but also it doesn't really give us any insight into the performance of our budget. So the first thing for me is to always ensure that we're tracking conversions, those that matter. We've got different conversions, primary, secondary, which there's a lot of detail you could go into there, but make sure you're tracking those, respecting privacy, being compliant with the way that you are tracking data, and regularly audit that setup. If your website's evolving, then sometimes conversion tracking can get removed, it can get dropped, or it can just not fire at the right time. So certainly make sure that that's being done on a regular basis. And next, it's quite a big one, it's quite a hot topic at the moment, but with Performance Max, which is that evolution of smart shopping, which people have become really accustomed to. But the key difference here, and I'm sure a lot of viewers will attest to this, is that it's a bit of a black box at the moment. There's very I say it's a black box. We've had improvements from Google. There's been incremental improvements, and things are much better. We're in a much better position than we first were. But because it's such a because there's not much detail, there's not much visibility, that's a real source of inefficiency. We can influence, we can input a few parameters, but then largely speaking, it's down to the machines to run the campaigns, which for a lot of people, the PPC purists, it does, and it did cause a lot of panic, I think, at that loss of control, because there's a lot of levers to pull within a PPC account, and not having that control, not having that visibility as we've been used to, has really impacted people. A couple of examples, or a really shining example, was an e-commerce client that I worked with, and the volume of sales that they're actually seeing has dropped, versus smart shopping. Over time, as we've learned with Performance Max, we've recovered profitability. So even though the number of sales isn't where it was, the profitability's up. So it's all positive from that front, but it's taken some time to get to that position. But at a kind of a fundamental level, we can't really understand at the moment the split of brand versus non-brand traffic, which is a real key area for people. And if it can be quite risky for businesses, in the sense of, if we're optimizing for conversions, then Performance Max is going to try and shift as much of the budget towards what's converting, and very often that's brand. So it can give a false sense of performance. It can make things look like they're performing really, really well. They're not necessarily. And longer term, if you're optimizing towards your brand traffic, then you kind of, the reach that you're achieving with the campaigns, it's diminishing. You're not going to be reaching those customers who don't necessarily know about you. They know what they're searching for, but they've not necessarily heard about you. Because everything's coming through on brand search. So conversion rates may go up, but the actual overall reach and performance over time is going to be dropping. And another area as well that we're seeing potential inefficiencies. It depends how you look at this, but it's the automated videos. I think if you're not looking at your own video assets and you're letting Google create them, they can work. Very often they don't necessarily work, and they can have implications for brand and even compliance. If you're in a regulated industry, then some of the automated videos can potentially be harmful legally.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've seen some examples of those automated videos that Google creates, and yeah, they're not the best. I mean, yeah, it's impressive that a machine created this, but you definitely want to have a close look at what your brand is being positioned beside and associated with. I hadn't even thought about the compliance issues, but definitely an interesting point to raise. There's quite a lot to touch on there, but I just wanted to bring you in, Leo. Specifically, Gareth was talking about conversion tracking, and one of the big topics at the minute is the cookieless feature. You know, cookies are going to go away relatively soon, unless Google decide to delay that yet again. But you know, how would you kind of advise people on preparing for that transition to the cookieless future?
So for me, that's moving as much as you can to first party data. It's relying less on external channels, and I mean, I think a shining example of that is retargeting. I think retargeting as we know it is just not going to be around. I think if people are still relying really heavily on retargeting, then I think that now is certainly the time to start shifting away from that. And it's more towards and it's similar to the way Performance Max has gone with audience signals. It's very much looking at the understanding who your customer is, segmenting your messaging and moving towards that, but looking at the kind of people who are buying from you already. That's data that you will have, and using that data to target similar people based on behaviors, based on their outlook on life, their values and things, because we're seeing that shopping and browsing behavior, shopping behavior is heavily influenced by people's outlook on life. So move towards first party data as much as you can, and use that data in your outreach, rather than relying on things that are driven by cookies at the moment, because we're not going to have those in the same way. And a lot of the technology partners are starting to realize this, and they are making changes to the way that they operate. And I think the whole drive towards being more privacy conscious, being more compliant is certainly helping with that. But you use your own data to create your own audience signals is a real key driver for me and for Clicku.
Yeah, 100%. And just quickly, I just wanted to touch briefly on the Performance Max point. So just in your own experience, when it comes to Performance Max B2B versus B2C campaigns, are you noticing any kind of major differences between the two, or do they perform just as well for each type of business?
So it depends how you view it, and I think the single biggest area where we've seen really good performance is in shopping, product led kind of ecom businesses, and from a B2B perspective, it all depends on the funnel that people have got set up, and what kind of conversions people are driving, because of the mix between display, video, search. And the kind of the lack of visibility on how each of those channels is performing, that can present challenges for B2B businesses. Traditionally, where I've seen B2B performance really good at kind of a mid-lower end of the funnel is with search, but then at the top of the funnel, it's very much social, video, more content led channels. But at the moment, that's difficult to get the mix right. So and seeing that, it's very, very important to segment the type of conversions that you're trying to drive. If you're trying to drive upper funnel, then Performance Max can be very, very good, because you can free up budget to allow the machines to drive performance over there. But something I think which is particularly pertinent to you guys is the potential for invalid traffic on particularly on lead gen, because the reach is so much higher now with Performance Max than it has been traditionally with some of the more controlled campaigns. The potential for invalid traffic to come through is a lot higher, which is more. It still happens on ecom businesses that I've worked on, but certainly on the lead gen side of things, where forms are easier to fill in than a whole checkout process, that can be a real problem.
Yeah, 100%. I know in our experience, we have heard this issue with lead quality, specifically with Performance Max, with some businesses being flooded with a lot of spam leads. And Leo, what's your kind of take on that situation in terms of invalid traffic, and specifically in relation to automated campaign types?
So that's actually quite interesting. I was just thinking, you know what's scarier than knowing that potentially 15 to 30% of your budget is being wasted on invalid traffic, is knowing that these platforms are becoming more automated and they're optimizing for these signals. So this isn't just a one-off 20% over a month that you spend on fake users. These signals are now being inputted into a feedback loop, and you're just constantly getting an endless cycle of fake leads. And you're wondering why you're making changes, especially on the newer campaigns like Performance Max, and you're just not seeing that output. And that's because during the learning period, so those first 3 weeks, which are critical, you've inputted maybe 20 to 30% of invalid data. So this is actually quite interesting. I know we'll touch on it later, but yeah, I would say based on what Gareth mentioned, specifically around search being great for bottom of the funnel and other campaign types being better for top of the funnel, I think we're talking about a classic demand generation and demand capture tactic, where search is typically positioned as a demand capture channel, and that's typically where you would see the highest return on ad spend. But there is still some level of demand gen needed to capture that demand, and that's where social, any kind of outbound approach, search being excluded just because it's unique in its inbound paid approach, to then capture that demand.
Yeah, definitely, that makes sense. And I know, Gareth, you have been working with Lunio with some of your clients at Clicku to try and tackle some of these issues around automated campaigns and invalid traffic specifically. So are there any examples you could give us of the kind of performance changes that you've seen since introducing Lunio?
Yeah, there's a number of examples, and I think we've worked with clients with small budgets where we've seen kind of the single biggest area that we see is tends to be in budget, but there are knock-on impacts which I'll cover as well. But we've seen budgets or costs saved from kind of hundreds of pounds up to several £1,000s a month, and when we're talking about there, it's essentially freeing up budget. So we've then got budget that is we are able to reinvest that into campaigns to drive scale. That's incredible. And what that does is it gives the business more confidence that the budget is being invested in the right areas. There's more appetite then to spend more. But when we're removing the invalid traffic, the traffic that's not going to convert, often there's lots of impressions, there's lots of clicks, no conversions. So that's the impact there is twofold. So we've got the impact on budget, but we've also got the impact on the click-through rate. We're driving better click-through rate. That then has a knock-on effect on things like quality score, which then further impacts costs in a positive way. But we're driving more conversion, so the return on ad spend, the return on investment is a lot better. And because businesses have got that confidence to invest in a channel because they know that it's performing well, it's improving, then that helps us as an agency, because clients grow, we grow with them. So it's win-win across the board, and all that all stems from the fact that the business is gaining more confidence that their budget is being invested in areas that are working for them.
Nice, yeah. Yeah, it's good. Like if you can, if a win-win situation is always what you're aiming for. So I'm glad to hear that you've been having successes there. Leo, I just wanted to bring you in specifically. You know, we've recently rolled out our support Max campaigns, and just if you could give us some insight into what we're seeing at Lunio with relation to the Performance Max protection.
Yep, absolutely. So across clients, we're seeing roughly an average of 20-25% in reductions in costs. And I believe that the bigger percentage relates to Performance Max leveraging mostly display and video. So we see across display and video an average between 20 to 35% invalid traffic. Video, we've been seeing an increase in invalid traffic across the year, especially connected TV ads. What's really interesting to point out is despite the reduction in cost and the drop in clicks, one client in particular has seen an increase in 48% in conversion rates. And most of our clients would see up to 25%, if not more. So this kind of takes me back to the first time we actually acquired Lunio at my last place. So I was actually an end user. Back then we were called PPC Protect. Super interesting story. And the first reaction from plugging Lunio in was, oh my God, our spend and our clicks have just dropped dramatically. It does differ from client to client, but I remember it was around 20%, roughly about that. And it's interesting to point out that the immediate reaction was, oh, this is bad. Spend has gone down. This is bad. But then we were seeing results specifically around conversion rates increase. Our conversions didn't change as much. All we were doing was removing fake traffic. And that additional 20%, we were able to then reinvest across other campaign types, or just let Google reinvest that amount into the same campaign to get more conversions out of it. And then the other interesting point that we're seeing across Performance Max is a slight increase in cost per click. So my understanding is you would typically pay more for users that are genuine or have genuine buyer intent, because everything is all just a bidding war. If you're bidding, let's say maybe $2 per click, you might be getting maybe half the amount of traffic of a business that is outbidding you, but it's also the quality of traffic you're getting for those $2 per click. And initially, when I dived into the marketing industry, I wasn't fully aware of this. Until you really start to understand that by increasing your average cost per click and ensuring that you're only marketing to genuine buyers, people that would buy from you, you can easily increase profitability. Cost per click becomes meaningless in a sense if you're still seeing a higher return on ad spend.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. It's just it will pay off in the long run. Not even necessarily, it won't take that long in some cases. There are two more topics that I want to touch on. I'm just conscious for time. So there is the point about exclusion targeting. Leo, how can businesses make better use of exclusion targeting to stop serving ads to irrelevant audiences across search and social? If you could just give us a kind of quick overview of what the solution is there.
Yep, I'll be super brief here. So what we're entering is what I'd like to call the era of exclusion, where most of these platforms have automated targeting methods. So you can't necessarily choose who you want to target in platforms like Performance Max, but you still have some exclusion functionality such as customer lists. Across social platforms, we're seeing a similar trend, but it starts becoming more important around who you're excluding and who you're targeting. And let me just explain why. So using social as a perfect example, we saw a dramatic increase in performance by targeting active buyers than passive buyers. So on social, whenever you advertise your ideal customer profile, you would, let's say, put in a job title. Let's say you're on LinkedIn, you put in a job title, you put in the target company, and you'd think, okay, look, I have 10,000 people in this audience, all part of these target accounts. Yes, we're good to go. However, you're not refining that audience further to identify who are those active users. So by active users, I mean who has a complete profile on LinkedIn, who's part of active groups. So including this criterion and then starting to exclude people that would never buy from you. So people maybe that are open to move jobs, or that maybe might fit a criteria that doesn't fit your ideal customer persona. And by filtering that out, you're now just narrowing your ad spend towards, and you could be spending a lot more on this audience, but an audience that you're confident is going to purchase from you. So the same is applicable across search, where you're targeting, let's say, everyone searching for a particular query that might buy from you. But again, there might be criteria of specific audiences, such as fake users or invalid traffic, that you want to ensure are excluded from that bidding.
Yeah, that's a great point, particularly about looking at the completeness of a user's profile in relation to your targeting. It's that makes complete sense. The people who do have a fully completed profile, much more likely to be active and engaged on the platform. So just to come on to the last question, paid media trends we expect to see in 2023. I think there's a lot of different interesting points that we can touch on here. But Gareth, I just want to hand it over to you to kind of run us through the main trends that you're expecting to see over the coming 12 months.
Sure, yeah, and I think there's a couple that sit within PPC specifically, but there's a couple of them that are wider than just PPC. But I think in general we're going to see a continued move towards the automated campaigns. I think that the signs have been there for a number of years now, and as frustrating as that might sound to people in PPC, that seems to be the way that we're moving much more towards machine and AI driven campaigns. The talk really is around the kind of the keywordless future, the advent of kind of shopping, smart shopping, performance max, some of the changes that Google have made even this year with regards to the auto applied updates. We're looking at a future that's really not driven by keywords. So I think we just start trying to make sense of that, and I think come to terms with it. Really, this year is it looks set to accelerate, given that what we've seen over the last 12 months. Slightly outside of PPC, but I think it still sits very, very close to anyone in digital, anyone with a website really is Google Analytics 4. We've been really used to, and it's been a really good tool with regards to universal analytics. But GA4 fundamentally shifts how we collect and gather data. So that's going to happen in July at the moment. It could change, but anyone who's making use of the free universal analytics, that change is set to happen on in July this year. If you're using 360, that's been pushed back. But if you've not already done so, then I would really recommend making the move to GA4 now. You can run it in parallel to universal analytics. It won't have any impact, but what it will do is allow you to gather some data and at least start the learning curve and get used to it. Another really big topic, and I think it's one of the topics of the moment really, and we can probably discuss this between us, is ChatGPT. There's no getting away from it. I think that there is, you look on LinkedIn, you look on social media now, there's just ChatGPT everywhere. And from a PPC perspective, there are certainly some really good applications for it. I think there are potential downsides. Marketers are notoriously like magpies in the sense of they'll see the shiny new toy. ChatGPT is very much the shiny new toy at the moment. I would recommend people use it, but use it with some level of caution.
What's the biggest risk that you see if you're kind of using, or you're too heavily reliant on ChatGPT?
Sure, and the biggest risk is leaving it and kind of making use of APIs with ChatGPT and just letting it run a kind of set and forget mentality. And we've seen, and there are countless hilarious examples on social media of where ChatGPT has got things wrong. In a mathematical sense, in a language sense, it's still learning, and it is certainly a fantastic tool for things like research. So it can expand on keywords, it can find synonyms, it can help you with competitor URLs, it can help you build audience personas and targets and things like that. There's a lot of really good uses for it right now, but in terms of anything active, anything live, programmatic, let's say, that's where I would really recommend caution. But in terms of helping people generate headlines for ads, generate descriptions, absolutely, that's where it can really help, but with that human touch in terms of editing those and making sure that the message is on brand, because ChatGPT doesn't really understand your brand, let's say, in the same way as a human does. But the risks potentially of doing that is because ChatGPT is going to be getting its information from similar sources. Your ads could end up looking like very similar to other people's ads. So from a creative perspective, you could find yourself just looking like everybody else and just getting lost in the noise, which again is something to be aware of, and something to keep a reason to keep the human touch involved.
Yeah, definitely. As someone who works in content, I mean, I was super impressed when I first saw the kind of outputs that ChatGPT was delivering in terms of, longer form articles. I was kind of blown away. But then you them and you do come across, not infrequently, it does get things dead wrong, and it states them as matter of fact that this is confidently the right answer when it's completely off base in whatever regard. So it is very important to pay attention to the outputs and kind of screen those. And like you said, having that element of human control, we can't get rid of that. But who knows what the next 5 years has in store. Leo, quickly, is there anything you want to bring in on this discussion about trends?
I was about to add to the chat GPT. I mean, I'm quite passionate about this topic, but I mean, we have to acknowledge that this is free at the moment because we are the product. So the tool itself is using users millions and millions of data points to learn to release the new chat GPT, which is chat GPT 4. Now, my understanding of it is still somewhat limited. So chat GPT 3, I believe that's looking at maybe 175 billion parameters. And the new version that's coming out is looking at trillions of parameters. So we've looked at DALL-E and ChatGPT, both owned by OpenAI, redefine the AI space, but the content space in general last year. I feel that this is definitely going to have an impact in 2023 and onwards, especially looking at how interactive advertising is becoming. So video and interactive content is pretty much everywhere. Google already implementing this across search, where at times you're searching and you're seeing images, logos within search queries. At one point, they tested out animated images across search, so you could actually have a logo animation. I believe we're about to see with Google working on automated videos. If they had to leverage a powerful AI solution, we're pretty much seeing interactive content everywhere we go. So it wouldn't be the typical static search results that you would see. You would be able to interact with it at some kind of cost per engagement or something similar.
Yeah, very interesting stuff. Yeah, it definitely is going to be an interesting year. It seems like the pace of development just keeps getting quicker and quicker, and some of these leaps that we're making in the AI space are huge at the minute. So I think we've ran slightly over for time there, but I think we've covered everything that we wanted to touch on there. Big thanks to you, Gareth, for all the kind of tips and insights that you shared with us today. A lot of useful takeaways there. Could you let people know where to go to connect with you, and if there's anything else you'd like to mention before we wrap up?
Yeah, sure, and thank you for inviting me along. It's been really good to get some of these insights out. But I can be found at clicku.co.uk, or I can be found on LinkedIn, and I'm sure we can share my LinkedIn profile in any notes that accompany the webinar. But yeah, thank you for inviting me along.
Definitely, and likewise, if you have any questions for us, you can contact us directly at Lunio. hello@lunio.ai is the best email to reach us. We'll be happy to help you there. As I mentioned in the intro, when this session finishes, in just a moment, you will be automatically redirected to our free PPC resource hub, where you can access those guides and tools to boost your campaign performance. Leo, is there anything I've missed there? Obviously, I advise people to connect with yourself on LinkedIn too. Lots of great content and PPC memes to look out for on your page.
Yeah, no worries. We'll post the links in the chat. Yeah, definitely check out our PPC hub, particularly the list of 100+ memes that we have on the page.
Yeah, some real gems in there. There's a lot to dig through, but yeah, it's worth the time. So lastly, big thanks to everyone for tuning in, either here at the live event or on demand. Hopefully we'll see you again at one of our future webinars that we'll be running later in the year. Take care, everyone, and all the best with your Q1 campaigns.